Good morning, everyone, our East Oaks family. Happy Friday to you. I'm so glad you're joining us again for another live stream here at East Oaks Studio. Today we're going to continue going through our series on how to create dimension using the properties of oil paint and techniques that you can use in oil paint as well. Appreciate y'all being patient with us this past week. Obviously, we're in the area where Hurricane Florence has hit, and so we all kind of evacuated for a little bit and we decided to shut everything down. But we're back and we're happy to be here to serve you again. We keep all of our thoughts and our prayers out to all the people that were affected by the hurricane as well. But today I thought we're going to do a couple of things. One is we're announcing that Alex Venezia is going to be doing another live stream workshop, and he did one about a month or two ago, and it was really incredible. He did it on a still life. And in honor for the next still life live stream workshop that he's going to be doing, we decided we'd give away an opportunity for someone to be able to have access to the old live stream workshop that he did. We aren't releasing it to the public. It is not available to purchase. So this is a unique opportunity to win something from what we have in our archives right now. If you want to win, just make sure to like this post, share it, and comment Alex in the comment section. Also, if you have any questions during this, Divya will be asking the questions that y'all have near the end of this piece, and I'll be happy to answer anything that I'm capable of answering for you. So today, what we're going to be going over in the properties of creating dimension in your artwork and trying to make this two-dimensional plane turn into a three-dimensional plane is we are going to go over how to create edges and how important edges are in your work. This is something that in the beginning of my career, this is a property that really exists in all forms and all properties of two-dimensional drawing and mediums, but oil has a particular handling that allows for you to do this very effectively. Not only do you get to work with the transparent and opaque, which is what we went over last time, but in oil paint, the oil tends to blend very smoothly, which is kind of different than like acrylic, and it allows for you to be able to get to this really nice soft edge. One of the things I wanted to go through before I actually started applying and talking about the concept is brushes can be very important with this. So depending on if your painting is wet or if it's dry or if you're applying paint for the very first time, your brush and what kind of brush it is will help make it do the effect that you want it to do. So if you have a painting that already has paint on it and you're applying more paint to it, and say you're glazing into it or trying to create soft edges and the paint is not necessarily completely wet but slightly tacky, you know, where it's in sort of the process of curing, a hard bristle brush, contrary to what is intuitive, a hard bristle brush is what you would use to soften an edge. Other times, what I would be using also when I'm trying to create a hard edge, this is something that was very new to me in concept, because I always thought it was just the opposite. I thought you would use a soft brush to create a soft edge and a hard brush to create a hard one. And it just really depends on what stage your painting is in with what tool you would use. When I'm actually trying to create a hard edge with really wet paint, the best thing I think to use is a really soft brush, like a sable brush or a faux sable brush that you can get. This one right here is made by Rosemary. It's part of the Michael Klein series, and it's just a round brush. It doesn't necessarily have to be a round or a flat, depending on what you're painting. The other thing to consider is if it is really wet and you're trying to create that soft edge, hard bristle brush might not be necessarily what you want to use because it might lift up more paint than you want it to. So what I use sometimes when it's wet paint is I'll use a larger version of a soft dry bristle brush with no paint on it, and I'll go in and I will go ahead and push that edge till it gets a lot softer. Okay, so the purpose of hard and soft edges is a hard edge tends to bring things forward. Times that you would use a hard edge is in areas of, say, like you're working on a portrait. You know, the sharper the objects are, bring the attention of the viewer to those areas. So if you want the attention to a particular area, such as the eyes, the nose, some particular parts of it should have sharp edges in it. Things that you don't want the viewer to necessarily worry too much about, you would create softer edges for. So hair is an area that a lot of people, there's a huge range of what people do and don't do, but let's just use the old masters as an example, that hair is an example of where they soften it a whole lot more than what they see, because it's not the subject matter. The subject matter is the portrait and the person's face, and then we're going to draw your eye into it. So soft edges help push forms backward also. And so if you're turning something and you want it to go back into space, and it's such a minute difference in value, a really good way of making it feel like it's turning back into space is using a soft edge. So right now, let's just kind of go in, and I'm going to start by just doing a few lines here to kind of make my example, give you an example of what I'm talking about. So always work, you know, when you're painting on something, always work back to front, right? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just create what I would call a shadow. Now, a shadow is another great example where you could have a hard and a soft edge. So at first I'm going to make it a hard edge, and then I'm going to work into it and show you what having a soft edge on it would look like. So right here I'm just going to go ahead and create it to have a hard edge. And on this other side, I'm going to just make it look like I have a piece of something that's white in front of it. So I'm going to use another soft brush here. I'm just going to go right on the front here, and I'm just going to load my brush up. Now, loading up a brush is the term they use to say you're just putting a whole lot of paint on that brush. I'm just going to put it right on top of this. And since it's both wet, it's kind of blending, so I'm just going to kind of put it a little bit more over the top there. Okay. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to represent that this white is basically in front of this black. Now right now they just kind of look like they're side by side. But if I go in afterwards here, I'm just going to make it look like it's I don't know, it's like a swatch square here. And it had to be pure white. Just the whole idea is that there's contrast between one and the other. Okay, now, if I want this to represent a sort of a shadow of that, what I would do is I would come in, since this is a wet bit of paint, I'm going to just use this. I'm going to just go ahead and like take most of this paint off of this brush right here, and I'm just going to go in. I'm just going to soften that edge. And what this is representing is that the edge of a shadow really fades, and what happens is they call it a penumbra. And so your mind knows that a shadow has a real softness when it's cast on the ground. And I'm going to show y'all an example here in a second of what I mean by that. So let's just say that that is the back of it, and I just created the edge. It still has a sharpness to it, but it's softer than it was. And then I'm going to go in with this bristle brush. Add a little bit more like to it. And create that edge to be even more. Now I see that I've lifted some of the inside off, and so I want to continue to make it feel like it's black. So I'm just going to go in just like that and create a soft edge there. All right, so now I'm going to just represent this white as coming up to the top like this. And this is an example of how you can make something feel like it's coming forward or going back a space. So on the bottom, I'm just going to create a little bit of the shadow that comes underneath, like this. Now you can make this shadow go much further. You know, say that now, if I wanted to, and I wanted to make it look like these are even further apart, I could make the shadow even larger than the object, right? I could bring it down more. And it would represent that the shadow is much further away. And then I could soften the edge again, even more so. And that would, the penumbra gets larger when it gets further away. And so the edge gets much softer. Okay, so another area that, so now that is sort of a representation of what you can do as far as creating some dimension. Now this looks a little bit more forward. This looks like it's a little bit further back. And I'm going to go into here just for the purpose of making it feel more like it's real. I'm going to just do that. Use my smaller soft brush, and I'm going to create that, try to help that hard edge right there with my soft brush. All right, so now another area is if you wanted to say that I wanted to create a real good way of creating dimension and variety in your painting is by trying to create lost and found lines. So say that there is like an area of this piece that is turning away or dipping. So say I wanted to make this like as a piece of paper, and that page corner is actually dipping away towards that shadow. Okay. Just tell me when. We back? All right, everyone, I'm so sorry about that. We are live, so every now and again we might have a technical difficulty, but basically we'll stop the teaching until like y'all are back live like we are now. So I'm going to keep going into exactly what I was talking about to keep showing you how to basically make harder and soft edges. Now, another thing to consider is that there's a massive amount of variety, just like from value, from white to black. There's like an infinite amount of variations of gray value in between white and black. Same with edges. And by creating a hierarchy of things that are the most important in your painting, that you're going to give the sharpest attention to, versus other areas that you might want to not have as much attention to. You can literally create a hierarchy of edge range just like you would a value range in your paintings. So I'm going to continue to show you on this piece though. So I basically have a representation of what would be like a swatch or a piece of paper. Let's just say that the paper is turning away right here though. So I'm going to take this brush and I'm just going to push away. Now remember, this is a soft brush, so I'm not going to like use it yet to soften the edge too much, but I'm going to go in. I'm going to just turn it as if it's going to be turning away. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just going in here and softening this edge. Now I'm going to just bring it over just for the purpose of it, making it look like it's a page that's going backwards in space. I'm just going to go back into the black and overlap it. Now I want it to be softer than the front edge that I have, but I don't want it to be as soft as this edge that I have representing the penumbra. But by softening this edge, it creates more attention to this part of the painting than the other. And so you can use it for the purpose of a lot of control in your painting. So it makes it feel like almost like this is curling under. So say I'm representing it now. It's not going to be perfect yet again. It's kind of like when I was painting the sphere when we were doing the thick and thin. The whole purpose of this is not necessarily to make this look perfectly real. The whole purpose of it is to give you the idea quickly. Now when it's something this small, I like to use a brush that is like a bristle brush, but one that's kind of almost frayed a little bit, that's been used quite a bit. Those are my favorite when I'm trying to create soft edges because they seem to work really well on just the frayed aspect of them. Helps make the piece look a lot better. It gives me more of the effect I'm looking for. And then if I want to just make it not as soft, I just go back in with my soft brush right on the edge there. Okay, so it's not hard as that, and it's not soft as this. It's right in between, and so my attention is taken away from that area. And it also creates a variety of making this look, to me, seem more interesting. Now I want to show you all an analogy, this is just a sphere, a basic sphere. It's what I use for showing form shadow and cast shadow, but I think it's very effective for showing edges as well. Joe, do you have that up? Okay, Joe's going to pull it up. He's going to let me know when he has it up, and then I'll use it as the concept here. So in this piece, there's basically almost a hierarchy of edge quality that's going on in this illustration. So the softest edge is right at the edge of that cast shadow, the farthest away from the sphere. And in that's where the shadow actually creates the softest area. And then as that shadow gets closer to the object, that shadow gets sharper and sharper because the penumbra of that shadow gets tighter. So that's a great example of how sort of shadows can be used with hard and soft edges, and it helps to our eye and the viewer know what's going on. Secondarily, if you look on the sphere, you'll see where the light kind of falls into shadow, and that whole area right there is because it's such a soft turn, creating a soft edge right there by what they call the terminator line, from where light fades into shadow. That is also another great example of how to use a soft edge to create a very soft and subtle turn of a form. Now, on the just opposite, where the light is hitting the top of the sphere, that area is an extremely hard edge, and that helps pull the sphere out so that everyone knows that that's separated from the background. It also creates that to be sort of the point of interest, which is if you have things in the light, often you want them to be the point of interest. So you're going to have sharper objects and more textural objects in the light, and then also even more contrasted objects in the light, and things that are in the shadow tend to be softer, thinner, and less contrasty. So also, if you look on the sphere and you look, say, at the very bottom of the sphere where it's connecting to the shadow, that's another area where even the sphere has sharper edges all the way around it than, say, the cast shadow itself does. But there's areas of that sphere that are softer than, say, the sharpest area of the top of that sphere. And so it actually is representing a soft edge of the sphere itself. And that helps create variety in that circle. And you now, by doing that into your paintings, it'll actually make your painting feel more interesting. So another example of how you can use it is I wanted to bring up an example of a portrait done by Rembrandt. And this is like, okay, I just showed you the concept. Now here's an application of how one of the old masters used it. So in that piece, do you have it up? In that piece, if you look on the far edge side where his side of his face is in shadow, if you look at the top of his temple where the hair connects, you'll notice that it's a much softer edge. And then as it comes down to the side close to his eye, it gets a little bit sharper. And that's because this is a bony area, and he's wanting to represent that bony area is much closer to you than, say, the side of his temple where the hair is connecting. So by creating that contrast of edge quality, he's representing one thing to be further behind and one thing to be a relatively closer. And then as it gets over this area, he knows that this is a big form, and it turns a lot softer than this area does, so beside his eye. So because it turns softer, he's representing it by a little bit softer edge. And then as it comes down below, that's like a plane that is really going to the side, and it doesn't turn as much, it's more planar. And so because right below his cheekbone, he's representing that with a little bit sharper edge, and then his beard comes into play and creates a softer edge. So it ends up being soft, hard, soft, hard, soft. And because of that, it creates a beautiful amount of variety into the piece that actually makes your painting more interesting and at the same time making it more dimensional. If you notice in the front of his face, other areas that he uses it is in the top part of his eyelid is a little bit sharper edge compared to the other parts in his face, and his lips, in the top and bottom part of his lips, and in his nostril. And the nostril is an interesting part because in the back of the nostril, you're wanting to represent that there's a separation, or what they call a contour overlap, between the front part of the nostril and what is going on behind it. And so you represent that with a sharp edge. But as you go closer to the front of the septum, those two planes end up connecting. And so he's representing that with a bit of a softer edge on the front of that nostril. And so that's when it ends up being some of the most effective, is when you have a hard and soft that are representing one form. So for an example on here is I could represent this, this white sheet on this side as being the hard moment that's coming right here. But then on the other side of it, on the other edge of it, I could soften this whole area as a representation that it's just turning back a bit in space. And that hard to soft in a form, whether it be in shadow or whether it be in light, can help create a very interesting variety. You know, a lot of wrinkles on an old person's face can be represented that way, where one part of it where the wrinkle plane hits an area is a sharp edge, but as it leaves that area, it ends up going soft. So say I wanted to represent that this whole thing has like a wrinkle in it, so like you would see on an older person's face, I could represent that with a little bit of gray, and I could put a really hard shape, a hard line here, and then on the other edge of it, where it ends up fading out, using my other brush here, and that's that hard bristle brush I was telling you about, where it fades out on this side. And that's a really great way to actually represent many, like what they call subforms on a face. So a lot of people, when they first start out to painting, they want to create wrinkles to being a line, and that ends up being basically a hard edge on both sides. So what that would look like is if somebody represented a wrinkle that looks like that. But in actuality, it's these subtle forms that turn into each other and back out again. So this would be a good representation of more of what that looks like on a person's face. So if you go back to the Rembrandt piece and you look on his face, you can notice on like his eyes, like his top of his eyelid, that is a hard edge on the bottom, but then on the back side it turns it into a form, so it softly goes out of the form. So there are a myriad of ways to be able to use this. You know, other areas that help, you know, just remember that hair often, it's counterintuitive. Everybody wants to draw hair to be very sharp. But if you look at the old master paintings, you'll notice that 98% of it is soft, and then they just do a few wisps afterwards to represent just a couple of hair follicles, and that ends up making the hair look very, very real. Then areas of interest you want to create to be sharper or in the hierarchy of your edges. And then in the areas of shadow or large forms that are turning away from you, you're wanting to create softer edges. And all of these things will help create your piece to be more dynamic and more realistic. I hope this was helpful today. I would draw more, but then that would probably end up making it be like more like an hour tutorial versus like a 15-20 minute. So, but in the future, if y'all want more of this content, we can create more examples and elaborate more on it. But for now, basically the idea is I'm going to try each week for several consecutive weeks to bring to you several pieces of content of how the painting property works. We are also doing the final drawing of Carlo Russo's frame workshop, which he's going to be doing next month. We, in our last video, did a said that it was a contest for you to enter, and it was for one of his spots in his present workshop. We are doing a present workshop for him. There's still a few spots available if you want to come to Raleigh, join us at East Oak Studio, hang out with the team. If you can't make it for whatever reason, we are doing also a live stream of his framing workshop, how he makes his frames for his paintings, that you can actually join live. And after it's live, once you've paid for it, it'll be archived for you to be able to open or look at any time you wish to have it. So it's not just that you're paying for it live, you're also paying for it to have it almost like you would have one of our video downloads. So let's see who won for coming to see us at East Oak Studio. Jim Surrett. So Jim, we're going to reach out to you, let you know that you have won. We're really looking forward to seeing you here at East Oak Studio, hanging out with Carlo, Russo, and all of us. Also, remember that if you want to be entered into Alex's live stream, his old live stream that's not available to the public, it's in our archives. We're doing one drawing giveaway for that. If you want to enter that, like our page, share this, and comment Alex in the comment section below, and we'll make sure to send you a link and submit you for that drawing. That also will start next month, where it'll be basically every Monday of next month. He's actually going to do a new live stream one, so check it out. Go to our website. If you've enjoyed this or have any comments or questions, we are always willing to make this stuff better for you and make the content better for you. We're here to serve you guys. So we're always open to any ideas that y'all might have, to things that you have questions about or want us to demonstrate techniques on. Divya, do you have any questions? Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Look forward to doing the next one with you in the future.